and welcome to Your Sparkly Brand. We're here to inspire and empower female entrepreneurs just like you. On this podcast, we share valuable how-to content, discuss common mindset challenges, and interview kick-ass women business owners about their journeys. In a world that tries to pit females against each other, Your Sparkly Brand is celebrating successful women, nurturing the next generation, and uplifting each other. I'm Megan Gersh, and I'm here with my co-host, Lauren Tassi. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, Meg, how's it going?
Really, really good. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's your week been?
So busy. I actually, if we want to just dive right into our sparkly moments of the week, I just onboarded a new project, which is super fun and exciting, which the project is kind of around designing podcast artwork. So it's kind of funny that they asked me, they were like, oh, do you have like any podcast experience? And I was like, actually, yeah. So that's been super fun. I've been working on the different designs for that project. But what about you?
So my sparkly moment of the week was Alex, my fiance Alex was on tour for about a week and a half. And he came home last week and I knew like he was just going to have a suitcase full of laundry. And I was just like, last week I was so crushed with client work. And I was just like, you're going to do your own laundry. He hasn't done laundry in 5 years. He doesn't even like know how it works in our building. Like you have to get an app on your phone. And like, so and it was one of those things where I was like, I could give him my phone and, show him how to do it. Or I was like, go down there's a sign, you can figure it out. So Alex did his own laundry. And that's making me feel pretty sparkly.
That is awesome. That's a win. So today we are talking about setting boundaries in your business. And this is super, super important for entrepreneurs at any stage in their business because it lets clients know what to expect when you get into a working relationship with them. And also it's just a really great way to kind of protect your sanity.
Yes, which is so important as, entrepreneurs, we think that like we can just like become our business and we can, handle it all, and you can't. And if you think you're doing it, you're going to get burned out. Like it's happened to me multiple times in the past few years since I started my business where I'm just like, this is fine. I can do this. I can, work through the weekend and I'll be fine. And you won't, trust me.
Yeah, definitely. I think it boundaries is like a weird thing too, because like no one has kind of like set boundaries in the beginning of their business, right? Like a lot of set boundaries kind of come along as you learn those lessons and like as you kind of pick up on things, like as you start to work with clients and that kind of thing. So you learn along the way what you will put up with and what you won't.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Because if you think about like when you got your first client or you weren't even sure if you were like really going to be able to do this as a business and you're like, yeah, I'm going to email them right away. Yeah, I'm going to respond to their email and then I'm going to work on their project tonight. And it's like, I would never do that now.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about like what exactly are boundaries? Because, in our personal life, we hear we should set boundaries in business. So boundaries are the rules you put in place to protect your time and energy. And again, it translates outside of business, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. And it's also a big thing is like, we all kind of have these rules in our heads about how we expect things to happen. But if you don't tell other people what your rules are, there's going to be a conflict because we can't just expect other people to understand what we think should be happening and how we should be treated unless we tell them. So that's a big part of it. And it's a positive way to control the situation. It's setting up expectations ahead of time instead of feeling defeated or like you've been used or, just sort of like that feeling of like dissatisfaction. It sets you up to feel good about a situation and be able to give all you can in the ways that you've set yourself up to allow it.
Yeah, definitely. And boundaries essentially keep you from getting burnt out and essentially resenting your business in a way. And just because when it comes down to it, you are not your business. What you do for work is essentially how you make money and how you live, right? You should be running your business and not the other way around. So you don't want to be missing holidays. You don't want to be missing weekends. Working 24 hours a day is just not sustainable. And I see so many people on social media that just preach that grind culture. And I am not about that life. I don't know about you, but boundaries are a super key part of sustaining that work-life balance.
So in terms of boundaries, like here are some examples on ones to set, in your business. If you haven't thought about these, if you don't already have some sort of system or process in place, here these are where to get thinking about things you can establish. So the first one is to create office hours, right? And these don't have to be, I mean, for me, I like a flexible schedule. I'm not like at my desk at 9 a.m. every morning, but I'm also not, I don't generally respond to clients after 7 p.m. at night. It's just a matter of like, okay, these are reasonable times to be working. It's flexible enough for me that it works with my lifestyle, but also doesn't keep me always on call, because that is not why I got into having my own business. I think you said, maybe it was in the last podcast, I forget which one it was, but marketing is never an emergency. And now that I might be using that. And then setting up your own off days, right? Like if you want to work weekends, like I have some freelancers I work with who it's just like better for their schedule. They work Saturdays, but then they're off on Wednesday or whatever. So it doesn't have to be the weekend, but I vote for 2 days at least off per week to be a normal human being. And then in terms of off days or when I'm not working, I break that rule all the time, but it's generally only to work on stuff that moves my business forward. So my own marketing, my own, whatever it is, unless I did have like a sort of a nightmare situation come in with a freelancer who's doing some work for me and it not being up to par and basically having to spend all weekend 2 weeks ago doing it. But that was like an emergency kind of thing. And that's not something I normally do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that comes with that is really setting boundaries around, in general, how you're going to communicate with your customers or with your clients. So once you have those kind of quote unquote working days, you will essentially set up like, okay, I'm going to respond between the hours of 10 and 7. You'll essentially set up like what methods of communication you prefer to use to communicate with clients. Maybe it's over email, maybe it's over text, or maybe you have a project management system in place where you can go back and forth with your client. You also want to make sure that you try to avoid having meetings and calls when they're not necessary. Just because a lot of the time when people get on calls, the conversation can kind of get flowing, it can get off track. You want to make sure that when you're having a call that you have a very outlined agenda of what you want to cover on the call. I would also recommend that if you are communicating with your clients on a regular basis, to set a boundary for yourself on how quickly you respond to them, as well as how many times per day that client will get a response.
Yeah, that is something I do. And honestly, like I kind of have to restrain myself sometimes from responding too much. One feature I love is in Gmail, you can schedule send emails. And now my clients are all going to know this if they listen to this podcast, but sometimes I genuinely like want to respond to things right away. But I know it's not good, first of all, because then you create this bouncing back and forth instead of like things being taken care of in the middle of it. And then also just like setting the precedent of I'm always available and checking my email, which I'm not. And I will send something to go out like an hour later, just so it's not like an immediate response, but I can get it out of my head and it's like checked off my list of things I have to do.
Yeah, that's such a good tip. I want to talk about a bit about how we communicate with people on social media as well, just because obviously as somebody that's in the social media world, I always tell all my clients, like, it's very, very important to respond to comments, to respond to messages, to keep up that kind of communication with those folks. But when you approach that part of your business, you really have to be mindful of how much time you're spending, and even set a timer for yourself. It can be super helpful when you are, let's say for the next like 20 minutes, you're going to respond to comments or respond to your DMs, and really stay mindful of the time that you are spending on that. Because a lot of the time, the people on those comments and DMs, they are not paying clients. So they're taking you away from the work that you need to get done that day.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's kind of what I wanted to ask you about. Social media is like such a thing that can suck up our time. That's literally what it's made to do. When that's your business, and that's not only what you do to promote your own business, but what you do for your clients, how do you set limitations around that for yourself?
I can tell you it's tough. It's very, very tough, especially as a person that provides a service around social media. It can be really tough because you feel the pressure to stay up to date with trends, keep in touch with like what are the kind of current best practices and those kinds of things. One thing that has been really helping me is not checking my phone straight away in the morning. I find that when you check your phone right after you wake up in the morning, it does kind of get your brain into social media mode, which is kind of strange to think about, but I've been basically taking a bit in my morning to really take care of myself, do some self-care, and not looking at my phone for a few of the first hours of the day, which is kind of hard for some folks to think about. But like, if you try it, you will definitely see like a shift kind of in your mindset. You'll have like less brain fog throughout the day. And it's just like one of those things where when you start off your day first looking at social media, those are all messages that are coming into your brain. Like those are comments, those are people's opinions, those are different things that you're absorbing. And it's first thing, you haven't even like brushed your teeth. You haven't taken care of yourself yet. So you really have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, it's kind of like eating Cheetos for breakfast. Like you're not starting with like something that's healthy and natural and, sort of the good way to start your energy for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great analogy.
And I think that kind of takes us to our next point, which is for me, like turning off notifications beyond just social media. Like I've done some things where now I keep my email on like the last screen on my phone, because even just that little, like that number gets to me. I did the same thing with text messages too. It's not in that, I don't know what it's called, but like the bar at the bottom that's always there. I took those off of there and now it's just like Spotify and like my clock or something. But sort of, again, just like trying to put things out of sight helps with me being able to like focus, because I've noticed my attention span is so much worse than it has been lately. And I can like particularly blame TikTok for that, just because I think that like it's so like you're like, I want more, I want more, I want more. And so that's the one for me that I've basically really had to put limits on, and just like not every day, like you can like go down a wormhole once a week, but other than that, just like don't do it, because then when I try and get off of it, and I'm like watching TV and I'm like instantly bored because it's not the stimulation that I want. So I don't like, in terms of notifications on my phone, the only thing that comes up on my screen is like direct text messages. Most of my group chats are muted. It's just like I can't deal with the distractions. I need to just focus, and I'll get to that text message whenever I need to.
Yeah, I turned off my notifications a long time ago. And honestly, it's been one of the best things that I could have done for my mental health, to be honest, just because, those notifications come in, especially with email. It's like every time you receive a message on your phone, it's like, oop, it's like a little distraction that goes like, oh, here goes my attention over here. And so turning off those notifications is a total game changer. Highly recommend it for anyone that hasn't tried it. You also want to set rules around different payment expectations. So if you're a service-based business, what payment methods do you accept? What is the turnaround time for how quickly you should be paid? And honestly, for larger projects, it's pretty common practice to ask for a deposit for projects. So putting a deposit in place kind of sets that precedent where both you and the client will be invested in the project. And I highly recommend doing it.
Yeah. When I first started copywriting, and I only recently made this change, I always did, 50% deposit up front, 50% on delivery of the first draft. And I've recently changed it to just everything up front, just because I've established and I feel like I can do that and it's less paperwork. But I have luckily never been in a situation where I didn't get paid because of that. But, I see so many younger copywriters or just people in general that sort of get so excited to have a client or have the work that they don't. And then bad things can happen. So at least get that deposit. There's a trust factor that happens when that transaction occurs that keeps your relationship with your client going. So this next one is kind of an obvious one, but I know for me, it's something I struggle with, is saying no when you're stretched too thin, when you're not inspired by a client, when it's, just seems like you don't have the energy for it. You don't have the time for it. When you say no to something that you're not excited about, it gives you the ability to allow something that you are excited to come in. And when you say yes and you really mean no, it leads to resentment, right? That's when you're like sitting there working away going, oh, this client, blah, 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 where like the people that you're excited to work with, you don't feel that way. And so your work is more energizing and you're more excited about what you do.
Yeah, I saw this one thing a few years ago at this point, but it was generally a philosophy around like, if it's not an F yes, then it's a no. And so that's something that I try to keep in mind, like when I'm taking on projects and, do I align with the core values of the company? Do I align with the mission? Do I align with this product? Like, do I feel like I can help this client really elevate their business?
Yeah. And then setting generous deadlines, generous for yourself. I think that especially when we're starting out, and I did this too, is it's like your client's like, oh, well, I need that in 3 days. And you're like, yes, I want this job. I want to get this job. I want to move forward, but that's not sustainable either. So I recommend build extra time into your deadlines. People, if you are good, people will wait. I usually do 2 weeks for smaller projects, 4 weeks to 6 weeks for larger projects. I was actually talking to a copywriter friend of mine who says when she does website copy, she tells tells them straight up, I don't start for 6 to 8 weeks. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh. She's like, and she has a whole strategy behind this. And she says it's actually helped a lot because it builds that scarcity thing and people get like excited to work with her because she's so far booked out. So I'm like, I might start doing that too. Just to give yourself that space to not feel rushed and be creative when you want to be creative.
Yeah, definitely. I think that also feeds into, as entrepreneurs, I think a lot of the time people do get caught in that kind of scarcity mindset of like, I don't know where my next client is going to come from. I don't know where my next customer is going to come from. And it really takes work to kind of shift your mindset out of that, because clients are everywhere.
And so we've been talking a lot about, if you're a service provider, but there's still plenty of boundaries that, product-based business owners need to set. And one of those is like your return policy, right? The more information you can give upfront, the better, right? There's a spot on your website for that. Go into detail about it, like set up those expectations from the beginning. I know a lot of people don't always read that stuff before they buy, but if you ever come into a situation where there is a back and forth with a customer, you can go, oh, well, it's all on our website. And so just putting that up there, making sure it's super clear, not vague, that it's, a step-by-step, here's what happens. That will help establish that set of rules with your customers.
I think ultimately you don't want to compromise your well-being for the sake of your business, right? Like you have to integrate self-care into your routine. I mentioned a morning routine earlier in the episode, but that might include going for a walk or journaling or meditating or playing with your dog or eating breakfast, whatever that looks like for you. It can really help to start your day out on the right foot so that you're in the right mindset to help your clients as best as you can. Because ultimately, if you're not well taken care of, then you won't be able to serve your clients.
Yeah, it's that cliche. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help other people. And it's if you're depleted, there's no way you're going to be able to deliver quality for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about how to set and hold your boundaries.
I think the number one thing is like a boundary should be like a gut instinct, right? It's like a quick yes or a quick no. Like, yes, that feels good. No, that doesn't feel good. And when you start to develop the ability to sense that stuff and, a client comes up and they're like, well, can you get that to me in 3 days? And your initial reaction is, oh no, then that's a boundary and it's time to establish that.
Yeah. And part of that is a learning process too. Like the more that you work with clients and customers, like that feeling that you're talking about will get easier to recognize. Like as you start to, make sales and make mistakes and, go through the motions of your business, like those are things that will come up. And additionally, you want to be upfront with your new clients. If you're having a discovery call or, if you're having like kind of an intro situation with them, you want to be upfront about your process, how you deal with certain situations, how you're going to be communicating throughout the projects and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And boundaries aren't just for people who buy from you. It's also for people that work with you, anybody on your team, even just sometimes you have to do it with your friends or, I'm working really hard right now, so I can't, let's get brunch next week or something. But it's just letting people know when you're unavailable. If you're bringing somebody onto the team, be like, oh yeah, I don't respond to email before noon, or just setting up those expectations in advance so people aren't just like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay?
Yeah, definitely. And I think to take it one step further too, it really, really helps to put your boundaries in your contract, especially if you are a service provider. If you're a product-based business, obviously put it somewhere on your website. We talked about the return policy and exchanges, those kinds of things, but putting it in writing can be especially helpful because if anything comes up or happens, you can always refer the client back to the written document that they have signed.
Yeah, I think so. Also for the product-based companies, a lot of times people now have their customer service, like you can text their concierge or whatever their system is. And I think that then that sets up an expectation of an immediate response versus an email you sort of expect you might hear back from them in a day. So putting those, customer services available between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Pacific or whatever, really, again, just sets the precedent and the expectation. And then the other thing is that you are responsible for upholding your boundaries, right? So if I have a boundary around, I don't answer text messages from clients, but I break that client is going to text me because they're going to think, oh, she didn't really mean that, or maybe she meant that for other people, or, I don't know, that's something old, and I've done it. And it's so hard to work backwards after you break a boundary. So it's up to you taking responsibility for upholding your boundary.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have had similar experiences. I have a very strict, no texting policy with clients and customers. customers. And so it just feels like a very personal thing to me. And so like, that's why like, I just have like a no texting policy. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, you have that in your contract, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that in my contract. I haven't had a ton of people text me. My thing I always say is, oh, I'm a writer. You know, I turn off my phone, I turn off my email when I'm in the middle of writing. And I think people kind of understand that to not expect responses. But I just don't copywriting is very rarely like, oh my God, we need to talk to the copywriter right now. So I just had one client who would, text me if I didn't answer my email. And I responded to them one time, and that was a mistake.
Yeah, it's a mistake that, you take that as a learning experience, and we don't do that anymore. So that's all that we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening. And we want you guys to go and implement a few of these boundary setting techniques that we have given you. So thank you so much for listening.
And if you enjoyed our episode, please leave us a review on Apple, on Spotify, on Google, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're growing. We're just starting out. So that really helps us sort of beat the algorithm and get people, new ears, listening to our podcast. So we're so grateful for you to listen. Until next time, stay sparkly.
Bye.